Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montavilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Baby Lock Soprano. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the settings menu. So let's open the machine. To start up with, this is your button for the settings. So when you push this, it gets you into the settings menu. There are 9 pages, and you can page forward or backward this way. To get out of settings, you can either push clear or OK. I'm going to push OK. Okay, so let's get back into settings. Now to scroll down through the various selections, these are the buttons you use, and you can scroll back up too. So the first one here has to do with lettering and stitch combinations. I'll give you an example of that. So if I had a stitch combination, I'm going to just scroll down to one I've already got in there, say OK, there we go. I'm going to get back into that. Now it shows up right here. So when I have this on the screen, I can't see the entire combination, but if I go up here, then I can scroll through it and see the entire combination to make sure that I've got all the lettering and all the symbols that I want to have in there. Okay, so that's what that one is. And for now, I'm just going to clear that back out of there. Get back up to there. There we go. Okay, the next one is needle position. Now this has to do with when it rolls to a stop, whether the needle is down in the fabric or up. So you can change that this way. I've got to go down to that one. Okay, there we go. It's got to be highlighted for you to change it. So now I've got it set so the needle's going to be up when we're done sewing. Now, if it's down, of course you can always move your hand wheel, but the best way to do it is just push your needle up, down button, and then the needle comes up. I'm going to turn that off for now. Okay, so now we're going to go down to twin needle. So twin needle, you can do these wonderful effects like this by having 2 spools of thread, that auxiliary spool pin up here, and then another spool of thread here. Thread it through your twin needle, and your twin needle is going to look something like this here, and there's a twin needle that comes with your accessories. So when you push this to on, it tells the machine not to do too wide of a stitch, because you can tell that those are wider than just your single needle. So if you did a zigzag or a wide decorative stitch, you want to protect your needle plate and your presser foot from the needle hitting that, so that's what it tells the machine. Now, one little caveat about this, you can get wider needles, but you don't want to use a wider spaced needle with this machine because this is not calibrated for that. It's only calibrated for your 2mm width. So, and needles do wear out, so eventually if you did a lot of twin needle sewing, you'd want to have a new needle. So I'm going to turn that off for now. And we're going to scroll down to the next one is width control. Width control is a really neat feature. So that has to do with your speed slider. So if you turn this on, what that means is now as you're sewing a zigzag, you can make it wider or narrower by just moving this. And you can kind of hear that little click that's happening. That is the speed slider now being width control. So you can make some really cool effects with that. Now this is initial needle, I'm going to go down. This is initial needle position. Now what that has to do is the side to side, whether you're starting in the left-hand needle position or the right-hand needle position. I'm going to go over here. Oops, let's get out of there. Okay, so right now, stitch number 1 is the left needle position. Stitch number 3 is the center needle position. So if you had that needle position, let me go back to here. Go down, here we go, right there. If you have it set so that it's going to be in the center needle position, that means when you turn off your machine, you turn it back on, it's going to choose stitch number 3, which is your center needle position as opposed to your side needle position. That has to do with it's kind of about preference, but also about your seam allowance. So I'm going to go back to the left-hand needle position because that's kind of the default. And then elongation, that's a really neat thing that you can do. What that does, okay, so you choose one of these stitches here. It's your 7mm satin stitches. And you can make them longer but retain the same stitch density. So it's a really neat feature that you can do in your decorative stitches, and you can even do a series of these, a longer and a shorter, a whole series of those. So that's what elongation is. Now, right now I can't choose that because I haven't chosen a stitch. So you need, for several of these settings, you need to choose a stitch first, then go into settings and make it change the setting that you want it to be. Okay, let's go down here. Thread density. Now, thread density, if you look carefully at this here, this is your standard thread density. Now, if I used a decorative, thicker thread, it would fill it in like this. But if I'm using standard sewing thread, I may want my thread density a little bit more so it fills that in a little bit better. You can also see with this stitch here. That's going to be these stitches up here in category 2 of your decorative stitches, 01 to 17. Those stitches there, you can change the thread density for that. Again, you need to choose your stitch from amongst those first, and then you can adjust thread density. See, right now I can't change anything because I haven't chosen this stitch. Character spacing is kind of interesting. If you're doing lettering, if you look carefully here, this is the standard distance between the letters, but you can make them a little bit further apart. Say you want to fill in an area or make this real bold or something like that. You can change the character spacing right here, and your character letters are right down here. We'll get into another video about stitch combinations and lettering. Size selection. Okay, so here's an example of regular size block letters, capital letters, and here's the smaller ones of the same capital block letters. So you can use these as your lowercase letters, or you could actually type in lowercase letters, but it just shrinks it down by about a third less. That's the size selection. That's what that does. And then fine adjustment. Okay. So for fine adjustment, let's go down here. You have fine vertical adjustment and fine horizontal adjustment. But I'm going to give you an example of why you might need something like this. When you do some of these decorative stitches, there's a lot of back and forth motion of the feed dogs, but this machine also has the capability of moving things side to side as well. So fine vertical adjustment, fine horizontal adjustment. So fine vertical adjustment, so you have a certain kind of material that you're sewing on, and it turns out that, okay, the little car looks like this. Well, it's not quite formed correctly. So you had to change this from what it was, 00, and this is what I got now, and this is quilting cotton on a piece of stabilizer. So it fixed the car from looking like that to looking like that. Again, when you're doing decorative stitching, it's probably a good idea to just stitch out a sample of what you're doing, take a look at it, see if it looks like what you want it to be, and know that you can adjust it side to side or up and down. Now, the way to adjust that is this stitch number 80. That's what that's for, to stitch something out. Your stitch should look like this, but if it's looking like that or like this, you can use these two lines to adjust that. Okay, let's go on. Presser foot pressure. This is, instead of having like a dial or something up here, the presser foot pressure is how tightly your presser foot pushes against your fabric, or how loosely. Like if you're doing a knit and you don't want it to stretch out too much, you may want to reduce your presser foot pressure. Okay, and I'll go down here. Presser foot height. Now this has to do with this button here. If I make this, I'm going to go up. Okay, if I make it a little bit higher, it actually raises it to the highest most position. Okay, so this is default right here. You saw how that went down. I'm going to go down a little bit more. Now this is more like the height that you would get for hovering. That's this one here where you got their needle down and it comes up just a little bit. So this is kind of preference. I would most of the time just keep it right in the middle, but there may be an instance where you want it to just come up a little bit, or you want to come up a lot, like you're using something with a lot of thick batting in there. This is the auto fabric sensor system. So if you're going over a lot of different heights of fabric, maybe in your quilting, and you want to turn that on, so that will help the machine to automatically sense when it's going over something thicker, and it will reduce the presser foot pressure a little bit, and then when it goes back to something thinner, it'll tighten it back down. Okay. Free motion. So what this does, I'm going to put this down so you can kind of see. When I turn this on, see what that makes it come up a little bit? So if we had our free motion foot on, we'd turn this on, and we'd take and lower the feed dogs. That helps that fabric to slide underneath your foot, because the presser foot is still down, but there's a little bit of room under there. Come on, put that back to where it was, and then free motion height. This has to do with the thickness of your batting. So if you have fairly thin batting, you may want to have that down a little bit more, because as it's making stitches, you want to have your free motion presser foot fairly close to your fabric. On the other hand, if you have that really thick, lofty batting, you may want to have this a little bit higher. Okay, put that back to default. And then pivoting height, that has to do with this one here. When you roll to a stop and you have in the needle down position, that was an earlier setting, which, by the way, this pivot height, this pivoting button will only work in the needle down position. Pivoting height, if you're going over some fabric, again, that has some pretty thick batting, you may want to have that be a little bit higher. And I'm going to just put it back to their default right there. But you may want to have it a little bit higher or a little bit lower depending on your fabric. Okay, buzzer on and off. You can't hear it? Now you can. So there may be preference that you have to just not have that little beep on or off. Down here, light on or off. Your machine is still on, but you don't have the light. Now I can think of possibly you have an external source of light, maybe daylight through a window or something. You just don't want to have that light on. That's really preference. And then down here is screen brightness. This has to do with, okay, say maybe you're sewing at nighttime, you want to have a little bit less brightness right here, or you're sewing in bright daylight in the middle of the day, you want to have a little more brightness. You can always change that right here. Okay, we go right here. Reinforcement priority means reinforcement stitches. This one right here makes a little knot on the back of your fabric instead of doing a back stitch. That would be if you had chosen that one there. All that means is it will make sure it does only that little knot in the back and not a back stitch. Okay, so I'm going to leave that on for now. Input sensitivity. This has to do with if your screen, if your touch panel is not responding to your touch as well as you would like it to, you can increase that or decrease that to your comfort level. Different people have different I don't know, it's magnetism or something to their fingers, so you can adjust it to your particular way of touch. Now, over here we have, on English, because that's my native language, but if your native language is something else, you can change that to a different language. And then we have the software version. Since this is a computerized machine, just tells us that that software version is 1.90. And then, of course, to get back out, we touch this here. So that's your basic rundown on your settings on the Baby Lock Soprano. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, give us a thumbs up. And if you have questions or comments, you can leave those in the area down below. We have lots of other videos on this machine and on other machines here at Montavilla Sewing Center. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye.